Today, I would like to speak, if possible, about something that may seem somewhat obscure and complicated. Almost all of us are slaves to words, which have become excessively important. Words are indeed necessary as a means of communication, but for most of us, the word is the mind, and thus we have become enslaved by it. Until we deeply understand this issue of verbalization and the importance of the word, we will continue to think mechanically, like computers. The computer depends on words. Without them, the computer would not exist, nor would it be useful to us. In the same way, for most human beings, the word and the problem are intrinsically linked and have become extremely important. Therefore, it is necessary to examine this issue of words. I don't know if we are truly aware of how much we are imprisoned by words, by symbols, by ideas. We rarely question the importance or the meaning of words. When I use the word word, I am referring to the symbol, the act of naming, with all its depth or superficiality. We often believe we understand the meaning of life just through the process of naming and symbolizing. But it seems we fail to realize how much our mind, the entire process of our being, is dependent on words, symbols, and terms. As long as we are slaves to words and remain at that level, all our physical and psychological activity will necessarily remain superficial. Today, much is said and debated about words and the construction of systems of ideas. But are we truly aware of the superficial or deep role they play in our lives? Can we investigate whether the mind can, at some point, free itself from the word? To me, the word is the past, not the active present. We live in a world filled with so much violence, hatred, and brutality that words like compassion have lost almost all their meaning. We are all aware of what is happening in the world: rivalries, ambitions, frustrations, brutality, and hatred resulting from the clash of political ideologies, parties, and opposing beliefs. Words are twisted to suit conveniences, losing their true meaning. Within all of us, consciously or unconsciously, there is violence. There is aggressiveness, the desire to be or to become something, the impulse to assert ourselves at any cost, whether in personal relationships, work, art, or writing. All these are forms of violence. Are we deeply aware of this? Cruelty is present in all aspects of the world. A small group of people exerts absolute control over millions. But are we aware of our own cruelty, our aggressive ambitions, and our desire for fulfillment? Without a complete change, a total mutation of individual consciousness, any society based on acquisitive and aggressive impulses is bound to become more cruel, more tyrannical, and more materialistic. We live in a state of mental numbness, accustomed to reading daily about murders, wars, and acts of violence in the newspapers. This conditions us, making us insensitive. The crisis we face in the world is not economic or social. It is a crisis in the mind, in consciousness. There will be no solution to this crisis unless there is a deep, fundamental mutation in each of us. This mutation will only be possible if we understand the complete process of verbalization and the impact of words on our minds. Words, symbols, and ideas have an extraordinary dominance over the human mind. Without understanding this influence, the mind cannot be free. Thought, based on words and memory, cannot, under any circumstances, cultivate compassion. Compassion is not the opposite of hatred or violence. It cannot be cultivated through thought, discipline, or control. Compassion only arises when thought radically ceases. To understand the mind, we must learn to observe. But what does it mean to observe? Most of the time, we observe through the lens of the past. We observe dead things, concluded things, finished things. Rarely do we observe something alive, in movement, without imposing our opinions or judgments. When we observe, there is usually a conflict between the observer and the observed. This conflict arises because the observer separates himself from the object of observation, trying to modify or judge it. But true observation is different. Observation without conflict is like following the course of a river without interrupting its movement, without trying to capture a single drop of water and separate it from the rest of the flow. When we can observe without separating the observer from the observed, without condemning or justifying what we see, clarity emerges. In that state, there is no division, and the conflict disappears. Now, let us examine this entity called the ego, or the I. Thought is the foundation of the ego. It is the result of memories, beliefs, and conditioning accumulated over time. Thought is reactive, shaped by the environment, culture, and past experiences. It is fragmented and contradictory, generating conflict and suffering. For there to be a complete mutation of consciousness, thought must cease. But how is that possible? The key lies in observation without separation, without judgment, without the desire to change or control what is observed. Compassion is not something that can be produced by thought. It is not an emotional reaction, nor is it a superficial act of kindness. Compassion only arises when thought, with all its divisions and limitations, comes to an end. When the mind is free of thought, it becomes compassionate by its very nature. In that state, there is total action, action that is not fragmented or contradictory. This total action includes compassion and reflects the true meaning of life. So, the central issue is not how to change the world, but how to transform oneself. As long as thought remains within the realm of words, as long as the I continues to divide, judge, and accumulate, there will be no true compassion. Transformation is not something that can be achieved through effort or will. It happens naturally, spontaneously, when the mind understands its own structure, and in doing so, becomes free. This transformation is the end of conflict, the end of violence, the end of divisions between you and the other. Do you see this? Not as an idea, but as a fact. If you truly understand, there is nothing more to do. Understanding is the mutation. The matrix is complex, but each of us holds a part of the solution. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and together we'll see beyond appearances.